Hi everyone. So I shared some stuff on Teams about or rather, I shared some grammar-related resources. These are from a funny web comic called The Oatmeal that will hopefully help you avoid some common grammar pitfalls, and hopefully you'll find some laughter in them. One that The Oatmeal didn't have, and that I find to happen a lot in student papers, and one that drives me absolutely bananas, is improper usage of an ellipsis. So I wanted to make a quick video about that just so you can understand when to do it. So A, you don't lose points, and B, it doesn't drive me bananas. So an ellipsis is 3 periods in a row. See what I did there. And this will illustrate how you can use an ellipsis as well. So it's just 3 periods in a row. 2 periods in a row is an error. 4 periods in a row is an error. 1 period is a period. 3 periods in a row is an ellipsis. So I'm sure many of you have used these in common speech, and you've seen them in books that you've read and texts and everything, and you use them in messages that you send to friends. But in academic settings, we use it in particular ways. So let's go over what those are. So in our common communication, the way you and I probably talk with friends via our phones, social media, and what have you, we often use ellipses, the plural of ellipsis, to indicate a pause or trailing off in our thoughts. So your friend could text you, "Are you coming to the club?" And you at home in pajamas would be saying, dot, dot, dot. So that's one way, we often use it to indicate that we're saying something and then we're just not going to finish saying what we might say. We also often use ellipses to indicate a pause in what we would have been saying. So if we're typing something in a text or in, any sort of virtual communication, we may type an ellipsis to indicate a pause that would have existed if we had said the thing out loud. So you can imagine my spouse texting me, "Where are the groceries?" And I would text back, "Well, dot, 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 you see, dot, 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 I left them in the car." Because in my mind, I am saying, "Well, you see, I left them in the car." And so it's to indicate what it would sound like if we actually had spoken that phrase that we wrote down. Now, sometimes it's even used to indicate sarcasm. So your roommate could say to you, "My crab rangoons are gone." And you would, and text you or whatever, and you would say, "Not sure what you want me to do about that, dot, dot, dot." So it's sometimes used to indicate tone. This is in, for the record, common communication. So what you and I would do commonly. This is not academic communication, and that is something different. And I expect you in this class to communicate yourselves in an academic fashion. So for the record, it is, in my opinion, extremely rare that you would ever actually use an ellipsis in your papers. It's just rare that you would ever have a need to. So an ellipsis in an academic setting indicates missing words, sentences, and phrases. We're usually using ellipses in quotes, or rather when we are quoting another person, paper, article, what have you. So here's an example of when we would use an ellipsis to indicate that in this quote here that I have, there's missing words, phrases, and sentences. So Abraham Lincoln once said, "407 years ago, dot, 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 shall not perish from the earth." So there's the whole Gettysburg Address is basically in these 3 little dots right here in these 3 periods. And so here the idea is that you are indicating to the reader, this is a quote from this person or from this source, but I am not providing you the full quote of what they have said. Basically, this is how quotes get taken out of context because people don't understand what an ellipsis means. And you should always put an ellipsis if you have decided, I'm not going to give the full quote, and instead I'm only going to take bits and pieces to indicate that you have chosen not to include everything and that you are leaving other things out that the source, the person, the book, what have you, said. Another example of when you would use an ellipsis is when you have not finished a quote in full. So you might use this. These are things, for the record, you might use in your paper. So you may pull from a paragraph and only use half a sentence from that paragraph. If, for example, it's the first sentence in a paragraph, or for Abraham Lincoln, it was the first sentence in his speech 7 years ago, that's not where the sentence ends. And so if the sentence does not end where you choose to end it, you have to put an ellipsis here. So Abraham Lincoln, I'll find the full phrase in a second, but 7 years ago is not where this sentence ended. So if ever you're quoting from a source, and I use source very broadly here, but if ever you're quoting from a source and you don't provide the full sentence that they gave, then you need to put an ellipsis to indicate this sentence continued, but I am not choosing to include all of that. So for example, Abraham Lincoln says, 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That is the full sentence. But because I started it and I only ended the sentence here with 7 years ago, I have to put an ellipsis, and that tells my readers that this quote continued into a full sentence that I just cut off right here. So if you do that, if you find a full sentence in one of the articles that you're reading and you decide I only want this first half, then you need to put an ellipsis at the end to indicate to me, Dr. Thornton-Lugo, the person reading it, that quote or that sentence did continue on to a full sentence. The alternative also applies for the record. So if I only wanted to include the second half of this sentence from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, just dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, I would start that with an ellipsis to indicate that this quote that I am providing comes from a sentence that had, a front end. So what I am providing to you is not the full sentence. It's not the beginning of the sentence. It's the end of the sentence. And the ellipses tells me that something preceded what I am quoting, but I, as the author, have chosen not to include that thing. An ellipsis, as I have shown in this presentation, can also indicate that a thought will be completed elsewhere. And here you can see I even made a grammatical error myself, so I have to fix that. An ellipsis, as I have shown here in this presentation, can also indicate that a thought will be completed elsewhere. So you can see here, ... an ellipsis is ... 3 periods in a row. So here it shows that I'm going to finish this sentence, and this shows me where I'm going to finish it. And this gives you also an illustration of how you would use an ellipsis in a case where it's in the beginning of a sentence or a quote, because here the full sentence is, an ellipsis is 3 periods in a row. I am putting 3 periods in a row, but I'm putting these 3 dots here to tell you that something came before it. Here we know what that is because it's right up here, and it's an ellipsis is. So I should note that in your time at Akron, especially given the college that we're in, you may find yourself, though, doing creative works where an ellipsis would be appropriate. If you're taking any sort of creative writing class where you describe a dialogue between 2 people, you could use an ellipsis to indicate, and you can see here I did it again, a trailing off in speech. So here you see Zuko, I, and says Katara, and that indicates that that person trailed off or stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence. Or a pause, Katara, I know, he replied. Those things here indicate how we should read it as a representation of a dialogue going on between 2 people, a conversation going on between 2 people. So when you see this in a novel or in a book that you're reading that's describing the conversation between 2 people, an ellipsis is either meant to indicate that someone has trailed off in their speech, so they've stopped talking, or that they are making a pause in their speech. So that's it. And I know it gets complicated, so if you're not sure about how to properly use an ellipsis, maybe don't use it or ask me for some guidance. There are hopefully some other resources available for you that you can look at, but I would really caution against using ellipses unless you're super comfortable with them, so you don't lose points. And like I said, it truly drives me bananas. So that's it. Hopefully this is helpful for you all.